Before we get into the news today, I want to talk about something pressing. Yesterday was a sad day for Star Wars fans. We lost the amazing Tom Veitch, who unfortunately passed away at the age of 80. Tom was best known for his Star Wars comics in the 90s, his Dark Empire series being the most prominent, and along with Timothy Zahn's Thrawn trilogy, Tom played a key role in keeping Star Wars alive throughout the 90s. And to this day, he remains one of the biggest contributors to the Star Wars expanded universe, and the influence he's had on this franchise can be felt all the way up to today. The late 80s and 90s for Star Wars were almost completely focused around comics, novels, and games. When Tom started writing the Dark Empire comics, it would be roughly a whole decade until The Phantom Menace hit cinemas. And so, in a way, he is partly responsible for Star Wars staying relevant in the 90s. As I say, Timothy Zahn and others too, but Tom Veitch not only did his Dark Empire comics, but also penned some key Star Wars adventures. For example, Tales of the Jedi comic series and the 1995 story Greedo's Tale, which featured in Tales from the Mos Eisley Cantina. Now, all of this might be legends, but Dark Empire, the comic series in particular, is so focal to this franchise. And so many elements and ideas from those stories inspired elements of the sequel trilogy and what Star Wars is doing now in shows like The Bad Batch and The Mandalorian, specifically in terms of Palpatine's contingency. Whichever way you look at it, Tom Veitch is a legend, and I urge you to go and read the Dark Empire comics or some of Tales of the Jedi. So rest in peace, Tom Veitch. Thank you for everything you've given us. And so with that said, let's get to today's video. So if you've been following along recently, you'll have noticed that we've had so many Kenobi updates. The leaks just keep rolling in, and well, once again, my dear friends, we have even more details thanks to LRM Online and Making Star Wars Net. Starting with the former, they've revealed that Obi-Wan and Vader are going to face off twice in this series, 2 separate duels. Now, as you'd expect, there is already a lot of fan criticism. Some fans are either upset or not sure how to feel about this. And believe me, if you're in that position, I get it. The general sentiment is that it's going to undermine the significance of their duel in A New Hope, since they're not supposed to have met since episode 3. After all, Vader says, "When I left you, I was but the learner. Now I am the master." So the argument is to have an extra fight, or now an extra 2 fights, between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope would lessen the impact of their encounter in episode 4. But here's the thing, I can see ways of them making this work without it doing so. We have to consider that the duels in the Kenobi series could just be forced projections, visions, or dreams, and not necessarily in the flesh. There are no concrete details beyond the fact that these two are going to fight, and there's nothing to say they're not dreams or visions. But on the flip side, if Vader and Obi-Wan do fight in the flesh, there is an argument to be made in defense of it. Some people have pointed to hints in the original trilogy of another encounter with Obi-Wan after Mustafar and before A New Hope. One of these hints is in Return of the Jedi, when Luke is trying to turn his father to the light side and remind him of his former self, Anakin Skywalker. Vader says, "Obi-Wan once thought as you do." Now, you could argue that Vader was talking about Obi-Wan coming to Mustafar to turn Anakin back, but that's not really why Obi-Wan went there. He went there to face him. Under the instruction of Master Yoda, a reluctant Kenobi knew exactly what he had to do. He didn't want to face Anakin. He was like a brother to him, but he knew that he had to go to Mustafar and face him. And from a certain point of view, some of Obi-Wan's dialogue can be interpreted in a certain way. I wouldn't go as far as saying he was trying to convince Anakin to turn back to the light. He said things like Chancellor Palpatine is evil and that he's allowed himself to become corrupted, but I wouldn't say he made a strong argument for Anakin to turn back to the light. Obi-Wan was literally following Jedi protocol, and his allegiance was to the Republic, which now had fallen, and before Obi-Wan embarked, Yoda said,
"Destroy the Sith. We must."
And reluctantly, Obi-Wan knew that's what he had to do. So going back to Return of the Jedi, maybe Darth Vader is referring to a separate incident where Obi-Wan does face him and tries to turn him to the light. This could be in the Kenobi series. Some really interesting food for thought. Now, we do have some more details for the Kenobi series, as the name of Moses Ingram's character has finally been revealed. As we know, she's going to be playing the third sister, who is described as a terrifying and brutal Inquisitor who chose to become one instead of choosing death after Order 66. Well, now, my dear Mandalorians, we know her name, and it's a subtle nod to Knights of the Old Republic. She's going to be called Reva, which is a female version of Revan. Making Star Wars, who broke the news, do say that they based Reva on Revan, so they might share some personality traits, and we're just gonna have to wait and see to what extent they have similarities. It could just be superficial, like a name and maybe some of the appearance, but there could be similarities in their story arcs. Now, speaking of Ingram's character, we cannot underestimate just how powerful she's going to be, because all of these leaks have been suggesting that she's the most terrifying of all of her colleagues, performing public displays of brutality in order to terrorize planets where the Inquisitors suspect surviving Jedi. And the third sister, Reva, along with the fifth brother and the Grand Inquisitor, are going to stop at nothing to ensure they've hunted down every Jedi they can find. And to think that once upon a time, she was a Padawan. And when you really think about it, the Inquisitor's choice is a very dark one. Making Star Wars also say about the character that she's going to, quote, define what an Inquisitor is in live action, and they go on to say that the character turned out better than they hoped, and the crew on set only had good things to say about Ingram in her performance as Reva. Awesome news. And so finally, my dear friends, some excellent news for Star Wars Rebels, which in my opinion is the best animated Star Wars show. I know that's a hot take, but there you go. That's my opinion, and fellow Star Wars Rebels fans know exactly what I mean. Well, on July the 6th of this year, we're getting 43 Star Wars Rebels short comics by Dark Horse. I'm simply over the moon. Star Wars Rebels for me was always my comfort show, especially when it came out during my undergraduate years at university, and to this day I do rewatches and binge the entire thing all over again, and it holds such a special place in my heart. And if you've not watched it, let me tell you this, once you get past the animated style, you realize that this show has some of the greatest Star Wars stories in the franchise. I say this quite a lot, but please give it a shot. If you've not watched it, go and see it. And to know that Dark Horse are the ones working on this, what more could you ask for? Now, I suspect that one of the reasons they're bringing out these comics is to encourage fans to consume more Rebels content ahead of The Mandalorian Season 3, but more so the Ahsoka series, which is going to be heavily dependent on having some knowledge or awareness of Star Wars Rebels. It's the show that introduces some key characters like Ezra Bridger, Sabine Wren, and Hera Syndulla, who are all coming into live action, and of course it's the first on-screen depiction of Grand Admiral Thrawn. And where he and Ezra end up by the end of Season 4 is critical to the premise of the Ahsoka series, and it will also give you some more context to Chapter 13 of The Mandalorian, The Jedi. So as we edge to the end of February and coming up to March, this is where the big hype for Kenobi and The Bad Batch Season 2 are going to begin. And March is also probably going to hold those two trailers, especially with The Bad Batch Season 2 coming out on May the 4th and Kenobi coming out on May the 25th. 2 months out has generally been the model that Lucasfilm follow. We might get the Bad Batch trailer in March and the Kenobi trailer in April, but I think they're going to really want to push the marketing for Kenobi, so we might get both trailers next month. How exciting. So let me know your thoughts on everything we spoke about in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give me a big fat thumbs up. Subscribe if you're new, and a huge welcome if you are. And the link to my Patreon content is in the description down below. But until the next one, my dear friends, may the Force be with you always. I'm Star Wars Neg. Have a good one.